a crazy story I want to start tonight's show out with. It is our featured story tonight. I thought it was interesting. Thought I would share that with you guys. It says, hopefully you guys can still hear me. Prisoners plead for air conditioning in a lawsuit against Florida Corrections Department, Tallahassee, Florida. So this apparently, probably a bigger deal back in the summer, but we're just now getting, it says the story launched on November 2nd. So that would have been a couple days ago, 3 days ago. Obviously, it's probably not as hot now, but you know how the court systems go. In Tallahassee, Florida, it was the hottest September in more than a century in parts of South Florida, and Dwayne Wilson could hear his 81-year-old fellow inmate gasping for breath and crying out for help at the Dade Correctional Institution, 45 miles southwest of Miami, on the edge of the Florida Everglades. So that is down. I mean, Miami stays hot, right? And if we're 45 miles southwest of Miami, then I bet she is warm. The elderly man was confined to a wheelchair and for weeks had been complaining of severe chest pain and difficulty breathing in the unventilated dorm where he was serving his sentence. According to a federal class action lawsuit filed this week on behalf of Wilson and two other inmates at the prison, early on the morning of September 24th, the wheelchair-bound inmate, who is identified in the lawsuit as JB, was heard once again begging for help. According to the lawsuit, a prisoner wheeled him to the infirmary where within 15 minutes, medical staff ordered him to return to his cell, according to legal filings. Soon after, JB was found unresponsive, his mouth gaping open, the lawsuit says. Oh, man. This is painful just reading. Attorneys said that on the day the 81-year-old died, the exhaust fans in his dorms weren't working and the heat index had climbed to 104 degrees. Jeez Louise. I mean, you get any higher than that, you're almost being cooked. Living in the prison's unair-conditioned cells could feel like being locked in a sardine can with no air to breathe, an inmate identified in the lawsuit as GM said, and the heat had taken a toll. The lawsuit filed this week by the prison reform advocacy group Florida Justice Institute says that the heat at the facility has contributed to the deaths of 4 people there and that prison officials have failed to take meaningful action to mitigate the risk posed to the elderly and disabled inmates in their care. The lawsuit, which names the Florida Department of Corrections, argues that the conditions violate the protections of the Eighth Amendment, which bar cruel and unusual punishment, as well as the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Rehabilitation Act. We had to file a lawsuit because they've thus far ignored the concerns of incarcerated people and their advocates, and so it appears they need a court to order them to do what they should have done on their own, said Andrew Oodlesman, an attorney for the Florida Justice Institute. So you guys kind of get the picture. This is an even longer article, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up there. But pretty sad story. Thoughts go to that poor fella. It's a rough way to go. In a world where air conditioning is, important. I've heard people say, well, what about all the years that we didn't have air conditioning? And that's true. We went, centuries without air conditioning, but we've become acclimated to certain conditions. Our bodies are used to a certain way of living. And so there's something to be said for that. But regardless of what the past held, 104 degrees is 104 degrees. I mean, that is way too hot. I don't care what century you live in.